Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees, which brings together diverse and unique voices from around the world to share their stories. If you like today's episode, remember to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a review. Here's your host, David Shunk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees. I'm joined by Cody down in Texas in the United States. He's here to give us his little spiel about his journey and his insight on adoption, and we're looking very forward to it. Cody, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, David. Pleasure to be here.
Tell us about yourself, where you're from, what you do, give it a little intro.
Sure. I was adopted by American parents July 23rd, 1997, just after I turned 2 years old. So I guess today's the 29th, right? About six or so days ago, about a week ago was my adoption day. It was, the first time that I kind of recognized it and really celebrated it. Actually, me and a couple members of my family went to a Russian restaurant and had some borscht, and I think it's pronounced palimi or
Palmini. Yeah.
Palmini. Yeah.
Excellent.
And some, just some good Russian food, and had a good time. But I was originally outside of Houston, really, Sugar Land, Texas.
Yeah.
And then moved to Dallas in 2019 to start teaching. I taught for 4 years and just recently resigned, and not sure what's next for me, but excited for whatever it's going to be. Just kind of taking a clean slate approach, and yeah.
So, just to confirm, you are adopted from Russia. I don't think you actually said that, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I was in Krasnoyarsk, Ukraine, in 1995. Yeah, my parents' names were Lydia and Nikolay. Yeah. And that's kind of all the information that I really know about them. I don't have a bunch of information about them. Just that it's possible that they were a bit older when they had me and had some other children and probably just could not, couldn't afford to keep me. And, I know some kids, some adoptees, they learn like, oh, my parents were told that I wasn't going to make it or something along those lines. But that's not really the case for me, other than I think it was said that the umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck when I was born. And but to my knowledge, I spent those first 2 years in an orphanage in Kansk, and my parents traveled to Kansk to adopt me. That's an interesting story in and of itself.
We'll dive into that, definitely. So let's start at the beginning. Growing up, have your adoptive parents been overall very supportive of your Russian heritage, somewhat supportive, or have they identified kind of how you identify as yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, when your parents have to, your adoptive parents, right? They have to, go before the judge, right, and I think one of the, kind of defend their ability to take care of you and just kind of make a good impression for the judge to approve, right? I think one of the questions that they got was, how are you going to, instill Russian heritage, in your child, right? So the response that my dad gave knocked just the judge off his feet, just laughing, right? Was that he said, in the States, in California, there's a place called Disneyland. And in Disney, I think it's Disneyland or Disney World, one of those, right? I think it might be Disney. And he said, inside the park, there's a Russian themed part of Disney World. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to take him to Disney World. So I had to say, never made it to Disney World. I made it to the other one in Florida, but there's no Russian themed part of that.
There's Epcot down there, though?
I'm sorry?
There's Epcot down in Orlando. It's one of the parks where, so Epcot is part of like Disney or the experience where you walk around and they have different like corners of the park for the country where you can have like their different food and
Really?
yeah, it's called Epcot.
We may have skipped that. We may have done the rock and roller coaster too many times, and just and missed that. But
So, did the judge know about Disneyland or Disney World or?
I don't know. But I just know that my dad's a very, I would say he's boisterous and he likes to laugh. He likes to have fun, and so I think that he has charisma. That's the word I was looking for. So I think that when he gave that answer, just stamp,
Yep.
have fun at Disney World. But with a serious answer, this was about where my parents did they instill sort of a Russian heritage in me. I would say no. No, there wasn't. It was always known that I was Russia and adopted, and there was never any animosity towards being adopted from Russia itself. But there was never any encouragement, definitely, to like, well, this is where you're from and this is important, and we should honor that. And I'm not saying that that's good or bad that they had the way that they did it. I'm just saying that's the way it was. Right. So yeah. I do wish that maybe I would have kept the Russian language.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, but unfortunately that was not the case.
Okay, you can always start learning, so don't give up.
Yeah.
So let's get into the adoption story because you sound eager to jump in. Tell us about your parents' trip over to Russia and how that and the journey that they did.
Yeah. So my mom, she had my older brother. His name's Clayton. She had my older brother. I believe she had at least one miscarriage. I think there might have been two, but I want to more confident she had a miscarriage.
Yep.
And she also had my sister Charlotte, who is severely handicapped. So I think that she, that was a lot for her, and she, they just made a decision like, what, we're gonna adopt. Like pregnancy has been hard, and let's just see how this goes, right? So she started looking, and the story that I've always heard is that for her, everything happened really fast, like just in a way that was not typical, and I think once I've heard this story, I've listened to a lot of the shows now, from Voice of Adoptees, so I've heard this too before, is that when they got a video and pictures of me, she was like, that's it, that's my child, and there was no turning back, there was no let me look at somebody else, anything like that. That's the boy. So that's a real positive thing to think about. And so she had two kids there, two kids already in the States in Houston, and my grandparents came to watch them while my mom and my dad went to Russia. They had to stop in Paris at for a layover, right? And this is, I guess, the 90s, right? It's I just imagine my dad has his fanny pack just packed with passport and all the accessories and everything. He's a guy who likes to have his stuff kind of prepared and on hand. But I say that because I think there was something like there was a real long layover for their flight to Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they decided to leave the airport, and as they were coming, I think entering the airport again, maybe they had to stay a day or something there. I don't exactly remember.
Yeah.
But it ended up that they were late for their flight, and they were like, I mean, this plane is getting ready to just leave them and just say, like, sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Dowd, you didn't make your flight, reschedule. And they made a split second decision to leave all of their luggage in the airport in Paris.
Wow.
And they say, like, we left it by this little, like fern or little plant that was in, the airport in Paris. And that's why, I mentioned the fanny pack, right? Because I can just imagine my dad just stuffing his fanny pack full of whatever is the most, necessary. And they just ran through the airport and made it on the plane. And I think that, like, maybe once they got to Moscow, or maybe while they were still had some sort of cell phone service, something like that.
Yeah.
They made a call back to the States to my grandparents to tell them, like, we just had to leave our luggage in Paris. We have nothing, and we are going to another country. So hopefully y'all can y'all help us? Can you do something? And I think somehow by, just, I suppose, just kindness of strangers or great customer service, their bags ended up in their hotel in Moscow when they got there.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So, I guess it's a story of, like, really just dead set on, we're gonna go get this kid, and we're gonna make sure that, like, we are on schedule, and that, even if we have to make sacrifices and kind of things don't go our way, we're gonna get there and we're gonna do it. So determination. So I'm grateful that they left their stuff there and took that risk.
If that's not dedication, then I don't know what is.
So, and I don't know so much about the journey, from Moscow to Omsk to get me, but I do know that, they made it over there. And, they said that when they, I think, when they went into the orphanage and they saw the kids and everything, one thing that they've always, talked about was just the fact that at 2 years old, I seemed in some way, like, pretty put together, right? That I could, like, and maybe this is just something, like, just out of pure necessity, right? But that I just had to sort of develop a routine and just to feel safe. And, I think they just talk about the fact that, like, I just seemed like I understood the processes of the orphanage, and
Yeah.
how I was going to get food, and when it was time to play, when it was time to do things. Yeah. And another thing they say is, they just noticed that, like, at 2 years old, I was very deft in my use of utensils. I think, like eating, like, forks and knives, foods, and that kind of stuff. But yeah, to my knowledge, I wasn't talking or speaking, a bunch of Russian at the point, which is probably, what played a role in them choosing not to sort of continue with Russian. Just say, well, let's just, teach English, But I don't have I don't have any memories, from that process,
Mm-hmm.
except for sometimes I think I have a memory of sitting in a hotel room playing with a toy car. And I asked my mom once, well, I have this memory of, playing with the toy car. Do you remember bringing, like, a toy car or something? And she wasn't super sure herself, but she's like, that's very possible that we brought something like that. And another memory of possibly, like, being in a really cold shower, and, like, in my mind, it looks like just like a basement, and being in a really cold shower, and my dad holding a shower, taking a shower. And then I think on the flight home, they said that I just screamed my head off the whole time.
Yep. Yeah, my adoptive mom told me that the agency that they use, because we're out in New England, they went through a program called MAPS, Main Adoption Placement Services. They're out of business now, but the agency at the time said, this is the first time the child's going to hear all these sounds, from a plane, the loud engines, and, try to maybe give it some Benadryl, make it's okay to make the child try to sleep, but apparently I didn't sleep either. I was very active the whole time too, so, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think even a very vague, and I just don't know how much I can trust these memories. So I think, a lot of times I don't know, maybe, done this, maybe somebody else listening to has done this, but a lot of times, like, I remember as a kid trying really hard to remember something.
Yeah, it's almost like, when I was younger, I thought about if I remembered anything, and to be honest, I don't think I really do. And it is weird though, because I went back to Russia 10 years ago, and 9 technically.
Yeah, I know. I listened to that
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
That was my favorite part of it, if I can tell you real quick.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'd love to.
Was right at the end, towards the end, I think, where you were meeting your aunt, I believe. Aunt?
At the end, cousins and my aunt, uncle, grandparents.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you turn, and at some point, you turned to your mom and you said, like, it's time to go home. Ready to.
Oh, it was when, I was having dinner with my adopted mom at the end of the whole trip in my city, and it was just the two of us. And that's when I said, I'm ready to go home. And the next day is when I had to say goodbye, and it was easy. But then as soon as I was on the train and it started pushing forward, I just lost it. All the emotions finally came out. Yep.
I'm just curious. I know it's not your interview.
No, that's fine. No, go for it.
Was it a like a good, it's time to go home? Like, I've done all the exploring I need to. This is the end. I have some peace here.
Yes. I mean, it wasn't, I went into it expecting, don't have too much of high hopes because you don't know what you're going to get. But I had enough that I felt comfortable that, I got to see the city, I got to see the capital, I got to play being a tourist, I got to see my home city, I got to see the hospital that I was from and born at.
Well, how amazing.
Yeah, unbelievable. And
I would love to find the hospital.
Yeah, and my aunt, and I said this in my interview when I was interviewing my mom, that my aunt over in Russia, Anastasia, my aunt Nastia, she is amazing. She drove me around personally and showed me really important sites that matter to me.
Is she one of the crazy drivers?
No, that's my uncle, and that's the grandparents. They are.
She was a pretty safe driver?
She was safe for Russia standards. Yeah, I've yeah, that's crazy. But I mean, I was content to the point where it was that, and add in like almost 14 days of intense emotional, like, just thoughts running through your head, and I didn't really show a lot of emotion because I was processing it the whole time. And that's why my mom was like, I really like, she was very good at staying clear and out of the way. She's like, this is your trip, I'm here if you need me. And I was pretty quiet a lot because I just was trying to take it all in and think about what I was experiencing. But yeah, at the end, I was just like, all right, like,
you want to lock everything in, that you're there. If you're talking and very active, it's almost as if, your mind is sort of ahead of what's going on.
Yeah, and I literally had there's no downtime. There was no alone time. The only alone time was when I was sleeping and maybe in the bathroom.
You're not even aware of that. You're not even aware of that. You're unconscious.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I mean, I came out of the shower literally the first day in my city, Smolensk, at the hotel, and banging on the door, and there was my family at the door at like 7:30, 8 a.m. And my uncle's holding, like some breakfast and a case of beer, and he's like, Maxime, pivo, which is pivo is beer. And I'm like, okay. So we're all sitting around, and my mom is clueless that the entire Russian family is like in our hotel room. So she just walks out in her towel and just screams. But the Russian family's loving it. Like they're going around looking at all my stuff. They're looking at my backpack. They're looking at my American passport. They think it's the coolest thing ever. And then they start playing with the toilet. It's like you'd think they'd never. I don't
Interesting. But this just crossed my mind while you were talking, and I have questions for you, I suppose, as well. But
no problem.
I mean, while you were in Russia and you were going through all this, and you had, I was thinking about the fact that, I mean, when we sleep, right? I mean, there's actually a lot of unconscious work that's going on. Did you have any strange dreams or anything while you were sleeping? Not strange, but just things that you remembered while you were asleep. That so much has happened. I can imagine, a really kind of interesting dream happening.
So the first night I went to sleep in Moscow, and I was with my adoptive parents, I dreamt about traveling to Russia, even though I was in Russia already, but it felt like a dream. So when I woke up and I was actually awake, I still thought I was in my dream. And because I always wanted to go back and visit, I'm like, okay, I'm still in my dream. And when, I don't know if
you were living a dream.
Pretty much, yeah. And, sometimes, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but when you're having a bad dream, or if I'm having a bad dream, sometimes I can literally kind of shake myself out of a dream and wake myself up. I remember trying to, okay, maybe it's just me. All right.
No, I don't think it's just you, but I just think I've never sort of consciously and purposely be like, no, I don't want to have this dream. I want to wake up.
I don't know. There's some dreams that I've had that I'm like, maybe they're like bad dreams. I'm like, okay, get me out of here, and then I wake up.
But I'm listening.
Yeah. So I tried to wake myself up, and I'm like, okay, wow, this is actually real. And then I actually hit myself, and I'm like, yep, this is real.
Interesting. You had, as you had traveled to Russia, you then had sort of, I mean, that sounds exactly like your unconscious just processing what's going on and what's happening to you.
Yeah, and I will say one of the strangest things was when I went to the orphanage that I was at, and that moment I walked into the doors and it shut, I smelled the food, and my body felt calm and normal, and I felt like I was walking into your grandma's home or something. It's like
I was searching through there. I was like, where is the David episode in here? I would like to hear David's, ask everybody about their stories. But
yeah, no, it's awesome. But anyway, so back to you. And then so it's common that as a Russian adoptee, that we don't have 100% accurate information about our records all the time.
Don't I?
Yeah. How does the lack of information affect you?
Oh, well, I'll tell you how it affected me this week or last week. I was applying to rent an apartment, and they needed my social security card, and somewhat concerningly, I couldn't find my social security card, which is a concern of mine that I can't do anything about at this point. So I went online I just sort of, I was like, oh, well, I can't get the apartment. And, now I moved in with some family, north of Dallas. And, but, I mean, I was like, I still need a security card. So, I actually, went online and, I have my social security, number memorized.
Yep.
So typed it in. I was like, I need a new one. And it pulled up and it said, this number is not associated with a registered citizen. And
oh boy,
I'll tell you, I mean, my heart beats, raised a couple levels there. And so I took everything, all the identifying documentation that I have, headed over to the Social Security office and sat down with her and was like, look, I'm, it's online it's saying I'm not a U.S. citizen. And her first question was, well, are you a U.S. citizen? Yes. Yes. And what I've been trying to get recently, because for about a year now, I've been interested really in trying to find out some more information about my family, my biological family, but I don't have in my possession a certificate of naturalization.
Yep. Nope. Yeah. I'm right there with you. I don't either. I can emphasize with you a little bit that I actually went through the same kind of experience with my social security number as well. Same thing.
Yeah, I've heard somebody else in one of the Russian group chats that I'm in. They had a very similar experience too. And anyway, so I'm sitting in the office and they're telling me, I'm not registered as a U.S. citizen. I'm like, I have a passport, I have driver's license, I've worked in the U.S., I've gone to school, I've traveled. I went through a background check with a federal agency. Like, how could I not be a citizen? But it seemed like, one of two options was, one, that my citizenship was never confirmed because, that my parents, may have been told that it wasn't necessary. So I never ended up with a certificate of naturalization. Or two, in the process of trying to, you know, find information out about my biological parents, I submitted a request through the Freedom of Information Act, two of them for that certificate, and that came back nil. So the woman at Social Security, she said, well, it's possible that they saw that you don't have that and changed your citizenship status. So there were really two options, but it ended up working out. I gave her I had a brand new passport, gave her my passport, and like, okay, well, this worked, and a couple days ago, got my Social Security card in the mail. So I'm a registered citizen. I am here to stay. And yeah, so that one thing that I can say people that like not I guess not a bunch of to return to your original question, like some of that documentation and information is important. And I I don't have some of it, and that makes me a little bit nervous. Sometimes for reasons I suppose that aren't necessary to discuss on a podcast. But I do want it, and I guess part of the question was like possibly some information is falsified, things like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I hear it, and I hear, often, hey, the father might not be the father on, there's nothing I can do about that, so I don't think about it too much, yeah, there is a lot that we take on faith, right? I mean, our birth date, like our birth date, I just take that on faith that, that I was born June 8th, 1995, and not what would the reverse of that be? August 6th, 1995.
Right. Yeah.
I just take that. There's nothing I can do. So, but I do know for certain that I was adopted July 23rd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is hard because just to even have a thought or like a doubt would be hard to, I don't know, just feel comfortable 100% until you actually had confirmation, especially when you hear stories from other adoptees who say, oh, yeah, they're in their 30s now. They're like, oh, yeah, I just found out recently that I'm actually 3 years older than what my birth certificate said. It's like,
oh my, you've talked to
there's a couple I know that their
wow.
birthday was wrong, and they found their family at an older age, and their biological relatives were just like, that's not your birthday. And the birth mother's like, you were born on this year. I would know. Like,
Yeah. I always suppose it like it's possible that I was younger.
yeah, it can go both ways. Yep.
I wasn't an infant when I was adopted. I was walking and talking a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely something that not everybody experiences in life. The I think part of what I think about more is that information. I love stories. People love stories about, what were you like when you were born? Did you have a lot of hair? Were you chubby? Were you this? Were you that? Did you cry? Were you calm? I don't, adoptees, I suppose on really rare occasions, have that kind of information. You know, that is something that can bring up sadness. So, I taught seventh graders for 4 years, and I taught ninth grade and 12th grade.
What subjects did you teach, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I taught literature for seventh, 12th grade, and then I taught writing composition. We called it classical composition, ninth for ninth,
Nice.
mostly ninth grade, some too.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, kids have those conversations together when they meet somebody new. I mean, like, oh, where were you born? Sometimes they ask, what hospital were you born at, and what were you like, and that kind of stuff. And um, adoptees don't have a lot of that information. I mean, until last year, I suppose knowing Ilya, you knew about the Russian adoption reunion in Niagara Falls.
Yeah, yeah. I heard of it, but no one invited me. I'm a little hurt, but
Well, I guess I mean I wasn't necessarily invited. I guess I just found by luck, just found the Facebook group.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's leaving you out. Yeah, just nobody. We all found Facebook, there, and but I think that there's talk of something in Boston. I don't want to put that on record, but I think there's talk of something happening in Boston in 2024.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I live 35 minutes away from Boston, so that's perfect. Boston's amazing. Love it.
What was the original thing that we were just discussing here?
We're talking about lack of information and how it's affected you.
Yeah, and then I had some.
The
I was
social
on
security number situation, yeah.
the. I didn't even know my parents' name, even though I had access to them. I didn't even know my parents' names until last year, because when I went to this Russian adoption reunion, everybody was talking about, oh, these are my parents' names. What are your parents' names? I was like, I don't actually know. I've never slowed down enough to look at the document to know if my parents' names are in there. So, yeah, Lydia and Nikolay.
Yeah, documentation is always a touchy subject for a lot of adoptees. It seems to be common that if you were adopted before the year 2000, things were handled much differently. For example, with the U.S., the law for automatic citizenship didn't take effect until 2000. So before, a lot of adoptees, including myself and maybe you, we came into the country as still Russian citizens on a green card or an alien card.
Yeah, I had an alien card. Yep.
Yep, me too. And that's another thing when you were saying you don't have a certificate of naturalization. I don't either. And there are some, places in the U.S. or, they just don't understand what do you mean you don't have one? How do you, and what always confused me, and I actually asked this question before to the immigration agency, was when you get a government form and it says, how are you an American citizen? Is it by birth or naturalization? It's none of them. It was granted to me by the courts in the U.S. And that's not an option. So I asked them what I do, and you know what they said? They said, just put down naturalization. It's close enough.
But you don't have the documentation to back that up.
There's no naturalization document. No, I was never naturalized.
That's important to have. I mean,
Well,
without it, I mean, there's not a whole. I mean,
I do have a certificate of citizenship, though.
Oh yeah.
So I have a document. Oh, okay. So I have a document. So what my adoptive parents did, I guess, was kind of smart. Was they got my birth certificate, changed and everything to my English name, and then when they got back to New Hampshire, they went to the courts in New Hampshire and got re-certified pretty much through New Hampshire that this is my name and date of birth, and signed by the courts to make sure. So they kind of took that extra step, I think. But
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the next step that I've been told that I could do is contact Homeland Security. and talk to them and see, what I can do.
I did the same thing when I was in high school. I made an appointment with them. They had an office go up at my home city. I'm sorry, the town I grew up in New Hampshire, Bedford. And the guy behind the desk, he was from Italy, and he was working for the immigration or Homeland Security office. And I told him, I'm like, look, because at the time I was applying to colleges, and every single college because you have to apply for FAFSA at every school you apply to. Every single college reached out asking for additional paperwork. Every single one.
I'm applying for a master's program right now, and the one thing that's coming back is citizenship.
Yeah, exactly. So, and after the fifth time, my mom was like, "This is ridiculous. We're going to talk to someone about this." And I kid you not, the guy said, "I'm sorry, but you just have to get used to carrying around extra paperwork your whole life." That's what he told me.
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
it's not a huge.
It's not a big deal, but yeah, is it annoying? Maybe, but so that's kind of where we're at. But yeah. So some adoptees have trouble connecting with others. Have you ever experienced any trouble with connecting with other adoptees?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I did not know that growing up. I was not aware of this difficulty that I had, but life has changed for me a lot over the past couple years, which really started in earnest in 2020, right? Right there at the beginning of the pandemic, I started some therapy, and I did that for 2 years, and throughout that, I had two different therapists. One therapist, started telling me, like, you really need to think about and consider, the fact that like you were adopted, and for the first 2 years of your life, right, you did not have what probably what an infant would consider safety, right? So she would say, she would sort of look at my life now, and the things, I guess, the things I told her about my life, right? She can't just look at it objectively, but the things that I told her about myself, right? She sort of deduced. She was like, I mean, from the time that you were young till now, right? You created yourself as kind of this little. She would use the words, an emotional island, right? Where it was really hard to reach out and connect with other people.
Yeah.
And as I was kind of, I don't want to say necessarily like learning that about myself, but as I was processing the stuff that she was telling me, right? I was talking to my mom a good bit about that stuff too, and I think that she was a little hesitant to tell me this, but I'm glad that she told me it. But she told me, that early on as a kid, she saw that I developed relationships differently than other than her biological children, or that biological children that she observed. I think that's really, it was more confusing for me to go through the world not knowing that information, not knowing that, hey, this is the way I've always kind of been. It was more confusing, just like possibly not having any sort of, kind of going around not knowing that this was part of me, So, but I mean, growing up, I would consider that myself. I had a lot of friends. I definitely think that I did have. I mean, I think I was a bit callous, emotionally callous, to the children around me sometimes. I don't know if other people would confirm that or anything, but that's the belief that I have about myself, right? I was definitely like at home, according to my mom, I mean, I was just like very, she couldn't understand, my teachers would come back and say, like, Cody is being crazy, he won't, he stands on the desk. And this is in 12th grade.
Ah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, I was just wondering. I mean, hey, there's always that one kid, as you probably know as a teacher, but
Oh yeah, there could be a couple of them. No, but this was in when I was young. Come back and say, oh man, got some behavior issues, and my mom, she just remembered having a real hard time understanding that because at home, apparently I was just very very good, for lack of better words, right, or compliant maybe is a better way to say that. And I can't really resolve or think of why there was that dichotomy of personality in me, that I would be around my family and be kind of straight laced, and all of a sudden I get to school and it's just it's just this whole different person. It's what it seems like, but I guess I can a little bit. I think that as an as a child, I don't want to say as an adopted child, but as a child in the family at home, I felt I felt very I felt proud that I was adopted. I always knew that I was adopted. Nothing was hidden from me, and it was always presented as a good thing, and I was happy about it and proud. And I would tell people that we meet, I'm adopted. And my older brother, he was real, he was protective of me because I think a lot of adoptees, they have some eccentricities around food, and I know that coming over, I was real protective of my food,
yeah.
even though I was 2 years old. Like I would just, I think they were just amazed at how much I could eat. That I just put it all away because it's like I don't know
When your next meal was, yeah.
when it's coming next. And I don't think I would hide things. I've heard some people, they would hide food. I think that's probably when they're a bit older and they're adopted. But I do know that if food, I mean, I think my mom said, she would like put biscuits in the oven, and I would just burst into tears because I would think that she's taking it away, and then I'm not going to have it. She's like, they're not cooked yet. Like I'm going to cook them, and then they're going to be out. But anyway, I say that to say, my older brother played for all C's, by the way. Clayton, Charlotte, Cody, Corbin. Yeah. And we were in the mall one time, and I think just this sort of salesman was going by selling something, and I was eating some spaghetti, my favorite food of all time. Had spaghetti yesterday. And the man sort of pretended like he was eating some of my food, right? He's just going around selling stuff and, just trying to make people laugh and to get them to open up and talk to him. And he pretended like he was going to take some of my food. And my brother just reached his hands over, and like stopped his hands. And he's only, a couple years older than I am. And he just looks up at the man and he goes, "Don't do that. He's adopted." So like, yeah, there was definitely, this sort of that sort of thing that I had as well. But that I guess not necessarily about relationship. That's my relationship to food, which is a good one. It's strong. It's healthy. And, a lot of adoptees, talk about this, but I think the way that my biggest fear with relationships, and I've always had a lot of fear around relationships, is I have often feared, that what if I don't feel the way about my family the way that they feel about each other?
Yeah.
And that comes up, as far as like pain as an adoptee and struggles, like that's the biggest thing. I think that's bigger than, not knowing what your mother's face looks like. I don't know what my biological mom or dad or anybody looks like, but that is more challenging and more painful than anything else. Yeah.
With all that, I guess you could call it trauma, right? Because that's kind of what it is.
I struggle using that word even because
it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to, victimize myself. Right. I want to recognize that like, hey, I live in the most affluent country in the world. I had a brilliant education. I have parents that love me. So yeah, I struggle to use that word trauma, but I think one of the things I'm learning lately, it is okay to say, like, my life is good and I'm grateful for the things that have happened to me and I'm grateful to be adopted, but also there is pain associated there too.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't want to use that word, you can still say there are some wounds that we've all gone through, some rough patches, of course. So, what was your, I guess, what advice can you give to other adoptees to overcome similar wounds that you've experienced?
I was reading a book yesterday. As a literature teacher, you can probably suspect I read a good bit.
Nope, didn't cross my mind.
I was reading a book yesterday, and it was talking about. It's actually Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. He seems like an important guy
Yep.
In the world right now. So I wanted to read his book, and I think it's either the 9th or the 10th rule. It says assume the person you are talking to knows something that you don't. Right. So listen. I don't know if I have advice. I don't want to give advice because I certainly have not hit a point myself where I am at peace with the fact that I am adopted and I have lived a different life. And yeah, these things are still kind of unresolved for me, David.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And the fact that you can see that and acknowledge it, that's a big thing to say. So that just shows you put a lot of thought into it, and that's definitely okay.
Yeah, I mean, I try to think about the world. I try to approach the world honestly as well. And I think that if I told you that, hey, you know what, this is how you get through it. This is the way that you can handle it. I think that would be play acting.
Yeah. That's very big of you to say that. That's really sound advice, really. Like, people are quick to jump to thinking like, well, it worked for me, so it must work for everyone else. And that's something that, it's not, it doesn't work that way. Everyone handles it in their own way. So my last question for you, and I always like to end on this note, what advice can you give, or what message, how about this? What message would you like to give to adoptees listening? Or maybe personally, your message you would like to give?
Yeah. Yeah, I know that you asked this question at the end of all the adoptee videos or a podcast. So I've kind of been running through my mind thinking about it, do what you can to be, honest and close to others, I mean, being close to the people around me and realizing that other people have pain as well. Our pain is not, the end of the line. It's not, pain is pain. It's not, the circumstances are different. The accidentals are different, but, pain is pain and other people have it. So, don't make an idol of your suffering, I suppose, and be grateful for wherever you are. Life is a gift. Everything is a gift. Yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Cody, for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your time. Anytime you want to come back on and share any updates about your life, we're welcome to have you back anytime.
Sure. Whenever I figure out the key to, be at peace with adoption, and I would come back and say, hey, here it is. What it seems like is that go, travel to Russia, go sort of to the end of the line, like yourself, and you might find some closure there.
Yeah, it can go a lot of ways, and sometimes the unknown scares people, but I think it's okay to, if you really want to find what's out there, they always say you got to start somewhere and you got to look somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for joining us today. We'll see you again soon. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for stopping by at another episode of Voice of Adoptees. We really enjoyed having Cody join us today. If you'd like to hear a story, you can always go online, www.voiceofadoptees.com. You can follow our podcast series on Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever. If you're adopted yourself or know someone, come take a look at us and see if it's a great fit. We'd love to have you on the show. As always, thanks for stopping by. We will see you next episode. Voice of Adoptees. Who am I?
Thanks for listening to Voice of Adoptees. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review. See you next time.